Hi, my name's Stuart Lynch, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to a couple of new features that the Charts framework's introduced in iOS 17. We'll take a look at the new chart selection method, first on a bar chart, which has greatly simplified our ability to select and access chart information. Next, I'll introduce you to the new section mark that allows us to now create pie charts, and then we can very simply add an additional argument to turn this into a donut chart, and with the selection method, create some pretty stunning visual effects. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. Last year when charts were introduced, I created two videos on the Charts API. The first was an introduction where I focused on bar charts. The second was on visualizing large datasets with bar charts. I'll not be starting from scratch in this video, and I recommend that if you've not used the Charts API before, these two videos will give you a good background, as in this video I'm going to focus on what is new and what has changed in iOS 17. I have a starter project for this video and it's available to download from the link in the description. And I recommend that you work along with me so that you'll learn better, and in the end you'll have a project that you can refer to in the future when you want to implement these features in your own projects. The starter project has 3 views, all accessible through a Start tab view, should you wish to run it on your device or simulator. We'll be coding in each individual view though, and everything will be viewable in the preview canvas. In addition to the 3 views, I have a wine type struct that is an identifiable object with 5 properties. The name represents the type of wine. In stock is how many of that type I have in stock. The color is one that I can associate with the type of wine, and the text is a description of the wine type. This ID property is just a computed property using the name, which will be unique. I also have a static array of wine type that I can use for my sample data, and you can see that I have 5 different wine types. In my assets catalog, I have 5 different colors, each one associated with one of those different wine types. So let's go back quickly to the basics and build a bar chart using this data. First, we'll import charts. Next, within the VStack, I'll create a variable called wine types, and that is my static all array from my struct. So now we can replace the text view here with a chart view that uses these wine types for the data that we can iterate through, and we can create that iterator and name it wine type that we'll be using in our closure to create our bar marks. For the bar mark, we'll use the simple X and Y overload, and for X we'll need to provide a value where the label can be type, and the value will be our wine type's name. And then again, for the Y, it'll be a value using in stock as the label, and the wine type in stock property as its value. So let me use Control M here, that new feature of Xcode that will separate my code onto multiple lines to make it more readable. Let's also set a frame with a height of 400. Right now, all bars are the same color, and we could use this foreground style and categorize the bars by naming the plottable value as our X marks value. I find, at least with this beta version of Xcode 15 that I'm running, that when I cut and paste, the preview doesn't always update. And the way I get around this is to comment and then uncomment the preview macro and its content. Now the problem here is that the colors don't really represent the colors of the wine types, so that is why I created my own color assets. Also, since our bar charts are using the names on the x-axis, we don't really need this legend here. So I'm going to replace the foreground style with just the wine type color and apply a gradient to it. The y-axis gives us a pretty good idea about how many bottles I have of each type, but in order to display the actual number, let me create an annotation, the bar mark, using the defaults and display a text view displaying the string interpolation of the wine type in stock value. Well, there's nothing new here. Last year, however, in order to detect a tap on one of the bars, we had to jump through a lot of hoops with Geometry Reader. Now it is so much easier. Let's create a new state property that's going to represent the x value of whatever bar that we are tapping on. And in our case, that's a string value. And since we initially don't tap on anything, it will be nil, so we'll make it an optional string called selectedName. Next, then, we can attach the chart a chartSelection method and bind to that state property. If our chart was horizontal instead of vertical, we would have used the chartYSelection. So let's observe some changes on that value with an onChange modifier, observing the selected name, giving us an old value and a new value, and let me just print the new value. We can see now in Xcode that we can view print statements in the debug area for the canvas too. And I see that as I tap, it changes from nil to the optional value and then back to nil. What I want to do then, when it's not nil, is to find the wine associated with that name, store it, and since our name is unique, we can be assured that our wine will be unique as well. First, let's create a state property that we'll call selectedWineType. That will be the optional wine type that we can then store our selected value in. Next, I'll create a function outside of the body called getSelectedWine, and it can be private as it's only going to be used in this file. And it'll have one parameter, and I'm going to call it name, and that'll be a string that we'll pass in. Then we can use the first method on the wine types array to compare the iterator's name to the name passed in to find the matching wine, and assign that final value to our selected wine type. If it didn't find one, it would be optional, nil. Then within our onChange function, we can use an iflet to only capture our new value if it's not nil, and pass it into our function. Great, so how can we use this? Well, now above the spacer, we can create a view that is conditional on the selection that will present more detail on that selection. So we'll create an iflet to unwrap selected wine type. I'll create a VStack. And for the first view in the VStack, I'll create a text view using the selected wine type's name. I'll set the font size to a title size. And then I'll present another text view displaying the selected wine type's text. Now, when I tap on a bar, the detail is displayed. Cool. One little problem though is that I don't know by looking at the bars which one I tapped on. So in order to do that, I want to change the color when I tap on it. And that color will be conditional using a ternary operator that will compare the selected wine type's name to the iterated wine type's name. If it's true, then we'll use the color.gray with a gradient. Otherwise, we'll use the wine type color with a gradient that we had before. Now the error we're getting here is because selected wine type is optional, so we'll need that question mark. This is pretty nice. On to the pie chart view then. One of the missing pieces in charts last year was a pie chart or a donut chart. Well, this year we got what we were hoping for, and that is the new chart type that allows us to use, instead of line marks or bar marks, a new SectorMark. Let's take a look at the basics here first. First, we'll start the same way as we did for the bar charts by importing the charts framework. Again, we'll create a new variable called wine types that will be our wine types all. And then we'll replace the text view with a chart view using the wine types as the data, giving us that wine type iterator. Well, now instead of using a bar mark, we have a sector mark, and the label is an angle. But like bar marks, we need to provide a plottable value, and this value will represent the number in stock. And what is great is that the sector mark will create the angle for us based on that number with respect to the total number. Therefore, for our sector mark, the angle will be the value where the label is in stock, and the value will be our wine type in stock. Of course, this doesn't look right because all the colors are the same, so we'll need to provide a foreground style. This time, let's just base it on the name. So we'll use a foreground style by using the value for the wine type is the label based on the wine type.name. Well, this is good because we need, in this case, a legend since our SectorMark doesn't include the name. If we want to use our own names and our own colors, we'll need to create our own legend. So let's do that first now by replacing the style to use our wine type color as we did for our bar marks. Now below the chart, I'm going to create a V-stack with an alignment of leading. Within the V-stack, I'll create a for each loop to loop over each of our wine types to get that wine type as a variable that we can use in the closure. And then I'm just going to create a label where the title key is our wine type.name. And then for the system image, I'll use a square.fill. Of course, they're all black, but what I can do is apply a foreground style of wine type.color to the label. So now we've created our own legend. Now there are a couple of other properties that we can apply to a sector mark as well as an angle. And one of them is an angular inset. And this will add space between the slices. So let me just use a 1. And then again, I'm going to use that Control M to move this onto multiple lines for clarity. Now we don't see the values here, so let's add an annotation. This time, however, I want to use the position argument and specify it as being overlay. Now, since this is a trailing closure, we can simplify it by removing the trailing closure label here. And then for the annotation, we can present the wine type in stock in a text view with string interpolation and set the foreground style to white color. There are a few more things that we can do with the pie chart, but I'm going to leave that to the next view, when we'll convert this into a donut chart by adding one simple argument to our sector mark, and then start taking a look at how we can utilize the selection method here as well. For our donut chart, I want to copy a lot of what we've done here, so let me just copy the chart view here and go on to the next view. So first, we'll import charts. And then once more, create that variable for wine types using our wine types all static property. Then I'll replace that text view with my copied chart view. And I'll remove annotation as we're going to do something else. Then on the chart, I'm going to apply a frame with a height of 350. Well, now let me add one more argument to our sector mark. And this will be before the angular inset, and it's called an inner radius. And this requires a ratio, being a number from 0 to 1. That's basically the size of the inset donut hole. So let's choose 0.65. And then I can add some corner radius to our segments after the foreground style. So let's use a corner radius of 10. So now let's work on the selection method because we're not seeing any information about what our sectors are. So in the sector mark, the selection will be of the same type as the mark value, which is the wine type in stock, which is an int. Because there's nothing selected initially, by default, it'll be optional. So I'm going to create an optional int state property called selectedCount. And then attached to the chart, I'm going to apply the chart angle selection method and bind it to that property. Let's take a look at what we get when we tap on one of these segments by using an onChange modifier once again. I'm going to make this more swifty by using a trailing closure syntax again. I'm not sure why Xcode isn't doing this for me right now. Could be a beta thing. But if you don't understand what I'm doing here, please check out my video on this topic, and I'll leave a link in the description. As with bar charts, this new value will be an optional one. So we'll want to only check when it's not optional. So let's do an if let to unwrap that new value and print it out. If I view this in the console output, depending on where I tap the segment, I get a different value. And this is because what it's given me is the cumulative total as I go from the top around the circle until I get a sum of all of the wines in stock, which in the end is going to be 142. Well, knowing this, then we can create a function that will tell us which wine type we're tapping on. If we are less than or equal to 7, we must be in this brown fortified section. After that, if we're less than 47, we must be within this red section, and so on. So let's create a state property called selected wine that's an optional wine type. And then, like with our bar chart, I'm going to create a function that will determine where we are in the range and update the property. So we'll create a private function called getSelectedWineType, and we'll pass in the value as an int. In the body, we want to determine the range of values that would represent a particular wine type. Well, for this, then, we can use the power of iteration within a higher order function's closure. So I'm going to create a property called WineType that will be the result of finding the first item of the wine types within a particular range. And this first function provides us with a wine type iterator that it'll step through. And since it's an iterator, we can get access to every wine type that precedes it in the array until it matches. So if we can set an initial value and call it cumulative total and set it to 0, then we can use the iterator to add that on using a plus equal the in-stock value to our cumulative total. Then, if the value that's passed in is less than or equal to that cumulative total, then we found our wine type. And we can assign that to our selected wine type and then exit the loop by returning true. If it doesn't find a match, we'll return false and our wine type will still be nil. Of course, it will always find the value. Now in the onChange modifier, instead of printing out that new value, we can use the getSelectedWineType from this value. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to add some animation here. Knowing this, then, we can apply another modifier to our SectorMark, and that's an outer radius. And that requires a mark dimension. And we can provide a different one if the wine type we were tapping on has been selected. So we'll use the ternary operator here, specify that if the selected wine type's name is equal to the wine type that was selected on, we'll use a marker value of 175, otherwise 150. Now, when we tap, we can see that they expand with animation, and our segments stand out as we tap on them. Also, though, just like the bar chart, we have access to the wine type that was tapped on, so we can present more information about the wine. Now, since our chart has a hole in the middle, we can use the chart background modifier to place some information that will be right inside that circle. So the chart background then gives us a proxy that we don't need, so we'll just use an underscore. But for the background, it will be different before I tap on a segment than it will be after I tap on one. So I'm going to use an if-let to unwrap the selected wine type, and then we'll create a VStack. Inside there, I'll create an image using a system image name of wineglass.fill. Then I'll set the font to large title. For the foreground style, I'll set that to the color of our selected wine type color property. Next, I'm going to create a text view displaying the selected wine type's name. And then again apply a large title modifier. Then finally I'll create a text view displaying the string in stock, and then use string interpolation to actually display the selected wine type in stock value. Now, if it's still optional, which means we haven't tapped on anything, we can use an else statement here. And then we'll create another VStack and display an image using the system name wineglass.fill. We'll apply a font of a large title. And then we'll set the foreground style here to be red. And then a text view, select segment. Below the chart, let's add some more conditionals on the selected wine and display the wine type text in the text view. This is really nice, and it only took a few lines of code. Well, I hope you've learned something here that you can use in your own projects. Displaying data as charts is very powerful. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. It helps drive more traffic to my channel. Thanks for watching.